My dad. His own anniversary party. About 90 guests sitting right there at the tables. My 5-year-old son on my husband's lap. And my dad, Frank Caldwell, 66 years old, stands up, taps his glass, waits for the whole backyard to go quiet, looks straight at my husband and says, "You're basically just babysitting other people's kids. Anyone could do what you do." Not a whisper. Not a private moment. Out loud. In front of everyone. My husband didn't yell. Didn't slam his fork down. He just set his napkin on the table very slowly and looked at my dad the way you look at someone when they've finally shown you exactly who they are. He said nothing. 3 days later, my dad would be sitting in a packed auditorium with over 400 people watching that same quiet man get honored in a way my dad could never buy his way into. Not with all his real estate deals. Not with all his money. Not with anything. And for the very first time in 66 years, Frank Caldwell had absolutely nothing to say. What happened in those 3 days changed 5 relationships in my family forever. Some of those changes I'm still living with today. And it all started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. My name is Ashley. I'm 32 years old. I'm a speech therapist at a children's clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina. My husband, Daniel, teaches 10th grade U.S. history at a public high school here in Charlotte. He also coaches the school's mock trial team after hours, mostly for free because that's the kind of man he is. This is the story of how my own father tried to tear my husband apart at his anniversary party. And how a man in a $22 tie, without raising his voice even once, answered him in a way none of us will ever forget. And hey, before I go any further, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you watching this right now? Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I read every single one and I am always amazed at how far this community reaches. And while you are down there, I want you to think about this. If someone said what my dad said to your husband or your wife right in front of your child, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet or would you have spoken up? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if stories like this one are your thing, real family, real moments, real feelings, hit that subscribe button right now. I post every single week and I do not want you to miss what is coming next. Okay, let me take you into this story. Let me take you back about 10 weeks. I was sitting on the kitchen floor with my son Noah, working on a puzzle together when my phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with one word. Mom. No picture. No nickname. Just the word. I had kept that number saved for exactly one reason: if something went really wrong. A hospital call. A funeral. That was the deal I made with myself 4 years ago when things fell apart between us. But I picked up anyway. To this day, I honestly don't know why. Ashley. Her voice was already shaky before she got through my name. My mom, Linda, had always been good at turning on the tears when she needed them. I had clocked that skill since I was about 10 years old. But this time it sounded different. Smaller. Like the years had worn something down. Hey, Mom. Your father and I are having a big party for our 36th anniversary next month. The whole family. Old friends. The neighborhood. It would mean the world to us if you came. Noah snapped a puzzle piece into place and looked up at me with big, curious eyes. I didn't say anything yet. He's changed, Ashley. He really has. He asks about you and Noah all the time. Last Christmas, he sat in Noah's room for almost an hour. Just sat there by himself. Didn't say a word. For years earlier, my dad, Frank Caldwell, had stood in his own kitchen, the same kitchen where he'd taught me to make his mother's biscuit recipe on Sunday mornings, and handed me an ultimatum. His exact words: "You walk away from that man right now, or you walk out of this family." I mean it. I chose Daniel. I walked out. 4 years of almost no contact followed. Noah deserves to know his grandparents, Mom said softly. You're the only one who hasn't come back home yet. Everyone else has moved on. You're the one still holding on to this. There it was. That spin. I was the difficult one. I was the problem. I was the holdout. I looked at Noah on the floor. 5 years old. He had never once heard my dad's voice. Never met my mom in person. My mom knew exactly where that soft spot was and she pressed right on it. I'll think about it, Mom. That's all I'm asking. She hung up. Noah looked over at me. Who was that, Mommy? I didn't have an answer ready. Daniel was at the dining table when I came back in from the kitchen. He was doing what he did nearly every evening, working through his students' papers with a red pen in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other that had gone stone cold an hour ago. He had a big stack of essays on the U.S. Constitution and he was marking them up like each one actually mattered. He always treated them like they did. My mom called, I said. He finished writing his note, capped his pen, and looked up. That was Daniel. He never half listened. When he gave you his attention, you had every bit of it. She wants us to come to my parents' 36th anniversary party. Big gathering. The whole family's going to be there. He was quiet for a moment. Not the kind of quiet where someone is dodging something. The kind where someone is actually thinking it through. If you want to go, we go, he said. But I need you to know one thing going in. I'm not going to pretend to be someone else just to keep your dad comfortable. I would never ask you to do that. I know. I just needed to say it out loud. Then I noticed something on the table. A thick envelope tucked under a pile of his papers. Official looking. A school district stamp on the front. Already opened, the letter barely peeking out like he'd read it and pushed it back in quickly. What's that? I asked. He glanced at it. Slid it a little further under the stack. Just some school stuff. Nothing that can't wait. I let it go. We had a bigger decision sitting right in front of us. We agreed on a plan that Friday. Pack up the car, drive the 2 hours and 40 minutes from Charlotte out to the small town near Asheville where I grew up, stay through the weekend, head home Monday. I never asked about that envelope again. That was my first mistake. And I wouldn't find out how big of one until Saturday night in that same bedroom, with that same envelope in my hands. The drive took 2 hours and 40 minutes. I know because Noah asked, "Are we almost there?" exactly 14 times, and I counted every single one. My parents' house looked exactly the same as the day I left. White vinyl siding. A big oak tree in the front yard. A flower bed along the walkway my mom had kept up every summer for as long as I could remember. The same wind chimes on the porch. Like the house had just frozen the moment I drove away and hadn't moved an inch since. My mom was outside before we even turned off the car. She came down the porch steps faster than I expected and had her arms around me before I could take a full breath. Oh, Ashley. Oh, my girl. I missed you so much. She smelled like the same hand lotion she'd used my whole life. She held on for a long time. I let her. My dad stood back on the porch. Slacks. Collared shirt. His version of dressed up for company. He looked older, something in his posture, the way his shoulders had dropped. He nodded at Daniel and reached out his hand. Daniel shook it. 2 seconds. Firm. Nothing extra. Then my dad looked down and noticed Noah. He bent down slowly, knees cracking, and opened his arms wide. Well, look at you, buddy. You must be Noah. Your grandma has been talking about you for a long, long time. Noah looked up at me. I gave him a nod. He walked right over to this man he had never met in his life, and my dad scooped him up, and Noah laughed and grabbed my dad's collar, and something cracked open inside me that I was not ready for. Inside, Mom had sweet tea on the table and a cake she'd baked from scratch. The house smelled like vanilla and something slow cooking in the kitchen. Warm. Almost like old times. But I noticed something. There was an extra seat at the dining table. Brand new cushion on the chair. A glass of water already poured. A name card sitting face down next to it. Who's that spot for? I asked. Mom's eyes slid sideways for just a second. Oh, just an old friend of the family coming by tomorrow. Come look at what I did with the back room. She moved on too fast. I noticed. I should have flipped that name card over right then and there. I didn't. Friday dinner was just the 6 of us. My parents, my older sister Brenda, who had spent 4 solid years keeping her head down and her mouth shut just to keep the peace with everyone, Daniel, Noah, and me. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes. Dinner rolls made from scratch. The exact same meal my mom had made for every important Friday I could remember growing up. For the first little while, it almost felt normal. Brenda asked Noah about kindergarten. The mom kept putting more food on everyone's plate before they asked. Dad carved the roast with the same knife he'd owned for 30-plus years. And then he started. So, Daniel. He didn't look up from his plate. Still in the classroom? The way he said still, like it was a phase. Like Daniel was stuck in something temporary and everybody was just waiting for him to grow out of it. Yes, sir. 10th grade U.S. history. I also run the mock trial team after school. My dad chewed slowly. Set his fork down. You know who I ran into at the golf club last week? Derek Ashton. You remember him, Ashley, just wrapped up his 5th real estate deal in 2 years. 39 years old. He looked right at Daniel when he said it. Now that's somebody who knows what he wants and goes and gets it. Nobody spoke for about half a second. Brenda grabbed a dinner roll and said brightly, Mom, this pot roast is honestly so good. God bless her for trying. Under the table, I reached over and found Daniel's hand. He squeezed mine once. Calm. Teddy. No offense to you, Daniel, my dad said. I just worry about Ashley's situation. Teaching doesn't really build anything lasting. You know what I mean. We're doing really well, sir. But I appreciate you saying something. My dad repeated the word quietly. Well, like it was the saddest word he'd ever heard. Mom knocked her fork against her glass. Who wants more to drink? I've got fresh lemonade in the kitchen. Dad brought Derek Ashton up 2 more times before dinner ended. His mountain cabin. A recent business trip. Every single time, his eyes drifted over to Daniel like a searchlight that kept finding the same spot. This was not small talk. This was something else. That night I laid in my old childhood bedroom staring up at the ceiling. There were still faint marks up there from the glow-in-the-dark stars I had pressed up in 8th grade. Little leftover ghosts of a girl who used to think this house was the safest place in the world. Daniel was on the air mattress next to the bed, reading to Noah. He did all the silly voices. Made Noah laugh so hard he snorted. Then, little by little, the giggles faded and Noah's eyes got heavier and heavier until he was completely out. His little hand still wrapped around Daniel's finger. Daniel set the book down and looked at me across the dark room. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. But I lay there thinking about Noah. What was I teaching him by keeping quiet through all of this? That when someone disrespects your dad right at the dinner table, the people who love him just keep eating? That being a good person means being a target and smiling through it? That thought sat heavy on my chest the whole night. Saturday morning, the house was in full motion before 7:30. Mom had hired a catering crew, 3 people in matching black shirts setting food up on long tables across the backyard. White tablecloths. Flower centerpieces. A big handwritten banner on the fence, Caldwell family, 36 years strong. My dad was out there directing everything like he was running a job site. Move that table left. No, the cushioned chairs go up front. Has anyone seen the name cards? Name cards. At a backyard anniversary cookout. I went out and asked quietly, Dad, how many people are coming today? Oh, somewhere around 80, maybe 90. Could be a few more. Did you invite Derek Ashton? He didn't look up from what he was doing. Derek's coming, yeah. Good man. You two always got along, Ashley. I let a beat go by. Dad, did you invite him because of me? He let out a short laugh. Like I was being dramatic. Don't read into things. He's part of our circle. Part of our circle. Derek Ashton had been to our house exactly twice in my whole life. Both times at my dad's invitation. Both times I wound up sitting right next to him. 10 minutes later, Brenda found me inside and pulled me straight into the pantry, shutting the door behind us. Dad has been talking about Derek all week, she whispered. He called him personally to lock in the invitation. And Ashley, he put Derek's name card right next to yours. I moved it to the other end. He moved it back. My stomach dropped. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and someone called from Daniel's school last week. Something about a ceremony on Monday. I didn't catch all of it. I just told them Daniel was out of town for the weekend. I didn't connect the dots. Not yet. I really should have." The first guests started rolling in around noon. By 1 o'clock the backyard was completely full. Cousins I hadn't seen since my mid-20s. Neighbors who still called me Little Ashley, even though I was 32 with a graduate degree and a kid. People from my dad's golf group. People from the neighborhood association. Country music drifting from a speaker on the back porch. Kids running around in the grass. Then a silver Cadillac pulled up along the curb. Derek Ashton stepped out looking like someone had told him the occasion called for confidence. Dress shirt. Dark slacks. A watch that caught the afternoon light. 39 years old with the kind of comfortable ease that comes when money stops being something you stress over. My dad walked straight across the yard and shook his hand with both of his. More warmth in that greeting than he had shown Daniel in 4 years put together. "Ashley, come say hi to Derek." I walked over with Daniel right beside me. Noah was on Daniel's hip, holding a dandelion he had pulled from the edge of the grass. "You remember Derek? Just closed a huge deal on a mixed-use property downtown. And this," my dad paused just before saying Daniel's name. A small pause. But the people standing nearby caught it. "This is Daniel, Ashley's husband. He teaches at a public school." Derek reached out his hand. Polished. Even. "Good to meet you, man." "Same," Daniel said. My dad clapped Derek on the back. "Tell them about the new project, Derek." "Just broke ground on a 70-unit residential complex on the east side. It's going to be a beautiful build." 70 units, my dad said, glancing at the people nearby who had naturally drifted over. "Now that's what hustle looks like, folks." Daniel adjusted the dandelion in Noah's hand and kissed the top of his head. He didn't say a single word. My dad was performing, and we were all just supposed to be the audience. And then came the moment I will never forget for the rest of my life. My dad stood up at the head of the table, tapped his glass with a knife, and the whole backyard went quiet. Nearly 90 people. He thanked everyone for coming. Thanked my mom for 36 years together. Thanked God, the caterers, the perfect Carolina weather. He was smooth at this. He'd always been the kind of man who knew how to command a room. Then he turned toward our end of the table. His eyes found Daniel like a flashlight finding a corner. "Daniel, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone here what it is you do for a living?" It was not a friendly question. I felt what it actually was, the same way you feel a storm building before a single raindrop falls. "I teach 10th grade U.S. history," Daniel said, easy and calm. "I also coach the mock trial team at the school." My dad tilted his head just slightly to one side. Let the quiet stretch out for a beat too long. "A teacher." He said it with a short half laugh. Not a full laugh. Not an obvious sneer. Something right in between, the kind of thing a person can always say later was just a joke. Basically just babysitting other people's kids all day, right? For that kind of pay. The backyard went completely still. Nearly 90 people. The only sounds, ice shifting in someone's cup, a bird somewhere in the oak tree, the Bluetooth speaker going quiet between songs. Daniel placed his napkin beside his plate very slowly. He looked at my dad, not with anger, not with hurt, with something quieter than both. A steady, settled look. Like a person who just had something they already suspected confirmed right in front of them. He said nothing. And then my son's voice cut right through it all. "Daddy, why is Grandpa laughing at you?" 5 years old. Just 5 years old. Something cracked right in half inside my chest. Not because of what my dad said to Daniel. Daniel could handle it. Daniel had always been the kind of man who didn't need anyone else's opinion to feel okay about himself. But Noah heard it. My little boy heard his grandfather make his dad sound like he was nothing. And he didn't understand why all the grown-ups were frozen. He didn't understand the silence. So he just asked the one honest question that nobody else at that entire table had the guts to ask out loud. 3 seconds of silence. Maybe 4. Felt like 10 full minutes. My Aunt Claire stared down into her coleslaw. My cousin Mark cleared his throat. Mom reached for her glass and knocked it sideways. I opened my mouth. My voice came out much steadier than I expected. "Dad, Daniel is the hardest working person I know. You owe him an apology." My dad looked at me without blinking. "I'm just speaking plainly, Ashley. That's how I've always been. I don't dress things up. There's a real difference between being plain and being disrespectful." He waved his hand at me. The exact same wave he used to dismiss people he was done dealing with. "You're reading too much into it. It was just a figure of speech." Mom pushed her chair back and stood up. "Who wants peach cobbler?" I made 2 whole pans. She was already heading for the kitchen, pulling the disaster behind her like it was a curtain she could close and pretend it wasn't there. Nobody moved. Derek sat 2 chairs away, reading the label on his drink like it was the most interesting thing he had ever laid eyes on. Not one single person at that table said a single word in Daniel's defense. Not one. My dad straightened his collar. "I'm not trying to be cruel, Daniel. I just believe in building things. Leaving something real behind. I'm sure you understand." Daniel looked at him for one quiet moment. Then he turned to Noah, and his whole voice changed. Warm. Easy. Like none of this had touched him at all. "Hey, buddy. You want to go check if there are any butterflies out in the yard?" "Yeah." Noah's whole face lit up. Daniel lifted him out of his chair, took his hand, and the 2 of them walked across the grass together. Past the banner. Past the food tables. Past almost 90 people who watched them go and then quietly turned back to their plates like nothing had just happened. That was the moment I truly got it. This family didn't just fail to protect us. They were part of what was happening. Right here I have to stop and ask you something. If that happened to you, if nobody at that table said one single word to stand up for your partner in front of your own child, what would you have done? Would you have left right then and there? Would you have said something out loud? Or would you have tried to hold it together for the sake of keeping the peace? Put your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And tell me, where are you watching from right now? What is your local time? Drop it down there. I am always blown away by where this community is coming from. Okay, now here is where the story completely turns. Keep watching. That night, after Noah was asleep, I told Daniel point blank, "We are leaving first thing tomorrow morning. I'm done." He was sitting on the edge of the air mattress in the dark. "Can we wait until Monday?" "Monday?" "Daniel, why on earth would we?" "We won't be here Monday. We'll be back home in Charlotte." He reached down into his bag on the floor and pulled out that envelope. The official-looking one from our dining table back home. The one I had seen and never asked about. He handed it to me. I read it by the thin light coming through the curtain. Charlotte Mecklenburg School's letterhead. Formal language. I read the whole page twice before what it was actually saying sank in. Charlotte Mecklenburg Educator of the Year. Ceremony, Monday, 1:30 p.m., Uptown Charlotte Convention Center. I stared at him in the dark. Daniel, when did you find out about this? About 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks? And you never said a word to me. He was quiet. Then, I didn't want you thinking I was keeping this in my back pocket as some kind of comeback to your dad. That's not what this is. It was never about him. Then what is it about? My students. One of them, Jalen, you've heard me talk about him before. He called me 3 days ago and said he bought a plane ticket from Houston just to come speak at this ceremony. He wrote something months ago and has been holding on to it. I held that letter against my chest in the dark. My husband had been carrying this piece of paper the entire trip. Through Friday dinner. Through the babysitter comment in front of 90 people. Through everyone at that table looking away. He hadn't said one single word about it. He did not need my dad's approval. He never had. Sunday morning, Brenda texted me at 7 o'clock. Coffee? The diner on Maple. Come now. I left Daniel and Noah asleep and drove over. Brenda was already in a corner booth, hands around a mug, with the look of someone who had not slept at all. I have to tell you something, she said before I even sat down. Dad planned this whole thing. Every bit of it. I sat down slowly. Planned what exactly? Derek. The seating chart. The question he threw at Daniel in front of everybody. She kept her voice low. 2 weeks before this party, I was walking down the hallway at home and I heard Dad on the phone with Derek. His exact words, and I am quoting him, I need you sitting right next to Ashley so she can see what a different kind of life looks like. I sat with that for a moment. There's more, she said. He's been telling people Ashley, the neighbors, people he does business with, his whole golf group. He told them you and Daniel were having serious problems, that you were probably going to split up soon. That is completely false. I know that, but he was saying it like it was already decided. Weeks before you even agreed to come. Don't you see how it worked? If you showed up without Daniel, his story was confirmed. If you showed up with Daniel, he was going to break Daniel down until you wished you had come alone. My hands were shaking around my coffee mug. Brenda, why didn't you warn me before we got here? Her eyes went glassy. Because I have lived inside this my entire life. I don't know how to step outside of it. I'm 35 years old and I still walk on eggshells in that house. She wiped her eye with her napkin. I'm sorry. I really am, Ashley. I reached across the table and held her hand. My sister. My scared, tired, ground-down sister. For the first time I stopped seeing her as someone on my dad's side, and started seeing her as someone who had been trapped inside his grip just as long as I had. Just in a different way. This was not a family anniversary party. It was a trap. And Daniel had been set up to lose before he ever got in the car with us. I went back to the house. Sunday brunch was already going, maybe 12 to 15 people from the night before, neighbors and relatives who had stayed over. Eggs, biscuits, fruit, Fritz. My dad at the head of the table where he always was. Daniel was helping Noah cut his pancakes into small squares. Completely calm. Like nothing from yesterday had happened at all. My dad was talking to one of his old business friends, but loud enough for the whole table to hear. You know what teachers actually make in North Carolina? Maybe 50-something thousand a year if they've been at it a while. My front desk assistant clears more than that, and she works 4 days a week. A few people gave polite laughs. The uncomfortable kind. Kind that says I don't want to be in the middle of this, but I also don't want to be the one who doesn't laugh. He turned to Daniel with a smile. Kind of smile that thinks it can hide what it really is. No hard feelings, right, Daniel? That's just how I talk. always have. I appreciate that, sir. 3 words. Flat. Clean. He gave my dad absolutely nothing to grab onto. So my dad turned to Noah, my 5-year-old son, syrup on his chin, pancake in his hand. You know, buddy, if your daddy had a bigger job, you guys could live somewhere a lot nicer. Grandpa could take you to Disney World, buy you anything you wanted. But your dad's paycheck just doesn't stretch that far, does it? The words hit the table like something heavy being dropped. Brenda stopped moving mid-bite. Cousin on the other side of the table looked at the wall. Mom reached for the salt shaker and completely missed it. And something inside me went very, very still. The kind of still that sits right before a decision you are not going to take back. I pushed my chair back and stood up. No big moment. No raised voice. I just stood. Dad. He looked at me, still halfway smiling. You do not talk to my son about his father like that. Not today. Not ever. I'm just being honest, Ashley. He's going to figure it out on his own eventually. No. You're being cruel. In front of a 5-year-old boy who loves his dad more than anything in the world. Mom's hand shot across the table toward mine. Ashley, please. Not at the table, honey. Mom. I looked straight at her. This started the moment Dad decided to go after Daniel at his own anniversary dinner. I'm just the only person saying it out loud. The whole table went tight. And then Brenda did something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. She pushed her chair back. She didn't say a word. She just walked all the way around to my side of the table and stood right next to me. Shoulder to shoulder. 6 steps. That's all. But in this family, those 6 steps were a thunderclap. My dad's expression shifted. The performance cracked just a little. You're both choosing a stranger over your own family, he said, low and cold. Cold voice was always worse than when he got loud. I'm not choosing a stranger, Dad. Daniel and Noah are my family. You walk out that door, Ashley. You said those exact words to me 4 years ago. And I got through it just fine. I looked at Daniel. He was already on his feet. Noah on his hip. Our overnight bag was sitting by the hallway door. He had quietly packed it that morning without being asked. Because Daniel always knows before I do when it's time to go. We walked toward the front door. 12 or 15 people at that table. Not one of them moved. Except Mom. She caught my arm in the hallway. Mascara running down her face. Please don't leave, Ashley. He'll calm down. He always does. That is the whole problem, Mom. He calms down and then nothing ever actually changes. I held her hands for just a moment. He doesn't need to calm down. He needs to be a different person. And you need to stop making it easy for him to stay exactly the same. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Daniel buckled Noah into his car seat. I loaded our bag into the trunk. Carolina's sun was hot and completely unbothered by any of this. Brenda came jogging out after us. Leaned into my window. I'll call you this week. I mean it for real this time. I squeezed her hand through the window. As we backed down the driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. My dad stood on the porch, arms crossed, jaw set. Mom beside him holding a dish towel. Neither of them waved. Noah's voice from the back seat, clear and easy like he was just asking about lunch. Mommy, are we going home? Daniel turned around and smiled at him. Not just yet, little man. Daddy's got something really cool happening tomorrow. You're going to love it. We found a Hampton in about 15 minutes away. I didn't want to drive the full 2 hours and 40 minutes back to Charlotte upset in the dark with Noah in the back seat. We'd leave early Monday morning. Daniel put Noah down with 2 bedtime books. He negotiated hard for a third, didn't get it, and sat with him until he was completely out. Then he came and sat beside me. You okay? I asked. Better than okay. I just didn't want Noah in the middle of any more of that. He's 5. We lay in the dark for a long time listening to the AC unit hum. At some point I rolled over and said, "I am so proud of you." And he said, "I didn't do anything." And I said, "I know. That's exactly the point." Monday morning we were in the car before 7. Noah was asleep before we got out of the parking lot. We pulled into our driveway in Charlotte a little after 9:30. Daniel showered and put on his good white button-down shirt. His navy tie, the $22 one I grabbed at TJ Maxx 2 Christmases ago and honestly almost put back on the rack. He stood in front of the hallway mirror and straightened it. His hands were completely steady. I put on a sundress. Noah wore his favorite dinosaur shirt because honestly, why not? His principal called while we were getting ready on speaker in the kitchen. "Daniel, this place is absolutely packed. We actually ran out of the printed programs. Your students have been rehearsing all weekend. And Jalen landed this morning." "We'll be there, Principal Holt." "Thank you." Then my phone buzzed. Text from Brenda. "I told Dad something is happening in Charlotte today that's connected to Daniel. He doesn't know what it is. He said he wants to come. He thinks it's going to prove him right." My heart picked up. I set my phone face down on the counter and took a long, slow breath. Let him come. The Uptown Charlotte Convention Center had that old carpet and Big Ambitions smell. But today it was packed. Chairs filled every single row. A banner stretched across the front of the stage. "Charlotte Mecklenburg Educator of the Year 2025. Balloons. Handmade signs from students. Over 400 people already seated. Teachers, parents, students, local officials, all of them buzzing. Daniel came in through the side door where Principal Holt met him with a firm handshake and pinned a ribbon to his lapel. I took Noah to the 5th row, close enough to see Daniel's face clearly from where we sat. The ceremony opened with the Pledge of Allegiance. Then Superintendent Dr. Pamela Rhodes, tall, silver-haired, the kind of woman who makes you want to sit up a little straighter without knowing why, stepped to the podium. "Every year," she said, "we take time to honor one educator who shows us what this work actually is. Not the flashiest. Not the loudest. The one whose impact shows up in people's lives long after they leave the classroom. The one who keeps showing up, no matter what." I looked around slowly. 7 rows back on the right side aisle, there they were. My dad and my mom, sitting in regular folding chairs just like everyone else. My dad still wearing the same button-down shirt from the party. He hadn't brought anything else. The mom with her purse pulled tight in her lap. They both looked out of place. Uncomfortable. Like people who walked through a door expecting one thing and already felt that something was off. "This year's winner has dedicated 14 years to public education," Dr. Rhodes continued. "He has led mock trial teams to back-to-back state championships. He has given hundreds of hours of his own free time mentoring students who had nowhere else to turn. And in the words of one of his former students," she paused, looked at the paper in front of her, "he is the reason I didn't give up on myself." She turned toward the wing of the stage. "Please welcome Mr. Daniel Crawford." The entire room stood up. All at once. Over 400 people. The sound moved like a wave from the very back of the room all the way to the front. Noah launched right off my lap, both hands clapping above his head, yelling at the absolute top of his lungs. "That's my daddy! That's my daddy!" 7 rows back, Frank Caldwell did not move. Now here's the part of this story I want you to really hear. 'Cause this is what my dad actually needed to see. Before Daniel could speak, Dr. Rhodes introduced the student tributes. The first was Jalen Brooks, 26 years old. He walked up to the front with a folded piece of paper and hands that weren't quite steady. He looked out at over 400 faces like he was still getting used to being the one people were looking at. "When I was 15, he said, I was sleeping on my cousin's air mattress. No real home. No plan. I came to school every day because it was warm, and because Mr. Crawford never once looked at me like I was a problem that needed to be handled. The room went completely still. He figured out what was going on at home, and he didn't just pass me off to someone else and move on. He drove me to school himself, 8 months straight. He paid for my testing fees out of his own wallet. When I got into college, he wrote me a personal check for my first month of textbooks. He said one thing: pay me back by finishing. I finished. Jalen stopped, looked down at his paper, looked back up. I'm a structural engineer now. I got promoted at my firm last spring. Everything good that has happened to me since that air mattress, every single bit of it, started with one man who decided I was worth showing up for when nothing in my life said that I was. Mr. Crawford, I owe you everything. The response from the room rolled forward in waves. The woman next to me passed me a tissue. I needed it more than I thought I would. Then Maya Ortiz, 23 years old, the first in her entire family to finish college, now in her first year of nursing school, stepped up to the front. Mr. Crawford taught me that history isn't just names and dates on a page. It's about understanding why people make the choices they make, and how those choices reach forward into the future. He didn't just teach me about the past. He changed how I see everything. I turned around. I had to look. My dad sat completely rigid, hands flat on his thighs, eyes locked on the man standing on that stage, the same man he had called a babysitter 72 hours ago. My mom had a handkerchief pressed to her face, not putting on a show this time, actually crying. And my dad, for the very first time in his life, was being made to see Daniel Crawford through over 400 pairs of eyes that were not his own. Daniel stepped up to the microphone. No notes, no cards, just his hands resting easy on the sides of the podium, like he was starting any other regular lesson on any other Monday morning. I'm not great at speeches, he said. A warm laugh from the room. But there's one thing I want to say before I sit back down. He paused. Let the room settle all the way. Someone said something to me recently, just a few days ago actually, that what I do every day is basically babysitting. That anyone could do it. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room. People figured it was a light-hearted opener, an icebreaker. Daniel let it settle. And then something shifted in his voice, barely. Just enough. I thought about that all weekend long. I couldn't shake it. The laughter was gone. And here's what I figured out. They were right about one thing. I don't do this for the money. I never did. I never will. He looked down at Jalen, sitting in the front row. I do this because a 15-year-old sleeping on a cousin's air mattress deserves somebody in his corner. I do this because every single kid who walks into my classroom deserves to know that their value, their future, has absolutely nothing to do with how much money their family has. He let it land. What a teacher gets paid has nothing to do with what a teacher is actually worth. And honestly, neither does anybody else's opinion. Over 400 people got to their feet. The sound that came out of that room was something I felt inside my chest. Teachers, parents, students holding their handmade signs, all of them standing. Daniel looked down at us. At me. At Noah, who was clapping both hands together over his head, bouncing on my lap, hollering, "Go, Daddy! Go, Daddy!" Daniel smiled. Just for us. He didn't look at my father. He did not need to. The lobby afterward was slow and warm, full of people wanting a minute with Daniel. Parents, former students, colleagues from other schools. He shook every hand, remembered every name. I was holding Noah when I saw my dad moving through the crowd. He walked like a man who had lost his footing somewhere and hadn't quite found it again. Mom was right behind him, one hand on his arm. They stopped a few feet from Daniel and waited for the group around him to thin out. When it did, my dad stepped forward. Daniel! Daniel turned. His face was patient. Not cold. Not warm, just patient, the way he looked at a student who'd finally raised his hand after weeks of staying quiet. I didn't know about any of this. You didn't ask. 2 words. No heat behind them. They landed harder than anything loud. My dad's jaw moved. He looked at the banner on the wall, at the programs scattered across the empty chairs, the reporter from the Charlotte Observer talking with Jalen 8 feet away. I may have been out of line, he said slowly. Some of what I said this weekend. Daniel held his gaze for a long, quiet moment. You were out of line 4 years ago, Frank. This weekend was just a repeat of the same thing. My dad flinched. A small one, a twitch near his left eye that I had only ever seen once before. The day a business deal he was completely certain about fell apart at the last second. Daniel turned back to a student who had been waiting patiently nearby. My dad stood in the middle of that lobby. Over 400 people moving around him in every direction. And for the very first time in 66 years, he had absolutely nothing. No comeback. No redirect. No way to reframe it. I want to be completely honest with you right here. Standing in that lobby, I did not feel like I had won anything. What I felt was much quieter than that. Closer to sadness. 'Cause what I had always wanted from my dad was not to beat him at something. It was just for him to be decent. To love my family the way a dad is supposed to. I'm still waiting on that part. Brenda called me that night. Daniel was in the kitchen washing dishes. Noah was in his own bed for the first time in days. He hasn't said a word, she told me. Since you all left the auditorium. Nothing. Nothing at all? He sat in the parking deck for over 20 minutes after we got to the car. Engine off. Hands on the wheel. Just sat there. Mom tried twice on the drive home. He didn't answer her. When you got back to the house? He stood at the kitchen window for a long time. And then, about an hour later, he said one thing. What? He said that young man. The engineer. He said Daniel was the only person who showed up for him. Then he sat down and didn't say another word all night. I pressed my hand flat against my forehead. The Frank Caldwell I had grown up watching would have had his counter-argument built and ready before the car even left the parking lot. He didn't do that this time. He went quiet. It's not an apology, I said. No. But it's the most I've ever gotten from him. We sat on the phone for a little while, 2 sisters on opposite ends trying to figure out whether a 66-year-old man who had spent his whole life being the loudest person in every room he walked into could actually change. Or whether he could only crack. Ashley, Brenda said quietly. He looked small tonight. I have never once in my entire life seen Dad look small. I didn't know if that made me feel better or worse. Probably a little bit of both at the same time. The article ran on Wednesday. Charlotte Observer Community Section. Local teacher named Charlotte Mecklenburg Educator of the Year. Half a page. Daniel's photo from the stage, plaque in hand, Noah photobombing from the side with his arms straight up in the air. Pure chaos, absolute perfection. A pull quote in bold type. Everything I have right now started with one person deciding I was worth showing up for. The reporter had called Daniel on Tuesday for a follow-up. Asked about the after-school mentorship program he ran on his own free time. The mock trial championships. What recognition like this felt like. Daniel said, whatever credit there is goes straight to my students. I just opened the door. They're the ones who actually walk through it. That line made the article too. Brenda posted the link on social media that same afternoon. No caption. No comment. Just the link. Then she set her phone down and went about her day. Within 2 days, everyone in my parents' world had seen it. My dad's golf group. His business contacts. The neighbors. The woman from his professional association who had been told by my dad, calmly as if it were already settled fact, that Ashley and Daniel were heading for a split. She called my mom on Thursday morning. Brenda told me about it later. I saw the article, Linda, she said. Frank told me those two were falling apart. But that photograph does not look like a woman leaving her husband. That looks like a woman who is proud of the man she chose. Mom couldn't put a full sentence together. The story my dad had been quietly building for weeks before we ever showed up, the one he had laid out like a stage set, fell apart all on its own. Nobody had to tear it down. Truth just showed up on page A8 of the local paper and did all the work by itself. He called on a Saturday. 9 days after the party. 9 full days of silence, which from Frank Caldwell was basically a once-in-a-generation event. Ashley. His voice was different. Not broken. Not shrunken. Just uncertain. Like someone trying to say something in a language they had never actually practiced. Hey, Dad. A long pause. I could hear the old clock in his home office ticking. I'm not saying I was wrong about everything. He cleared his throat. But what I said about Daniel at dinner and again at breakfast, that was out of line. Which time, Dad? Friday dinner? Sunday morning? Or 4 years ago in your kitchen? Clock ticked. I counted 8 full ticks before he answered. All of it, he said. Very quietly. All of it, Ashley. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Daniel was in the living room reading to Noah. You embarrassed Daniel in front of your own grandson. You told people my marriage was ending when it wasn't. You planned that entire weekend to make Daniel feel worthless. I know. If you want a real relationship with Noah, not a pretend one, a real one, it starts with actually respecting his father. Not just putting up with him. Not being polite when other people are watching. Actually respecting him. A long breath out. I'll do better, Ashley. Saying it isn't enough anymore. You have to do it. And if Noah grows up watching you treat Daniel the way you did this weekend, we are going to keep our distance. That is not a threat. That is just what happens. Clock ticked. All right, he said. Very quiet. All right, Ashley. I hung up. No big moment. No tears. Just a line drawn in plain, calm words. A line that should have been drawn 4 years earlier. 'Cause here's something I know now that took me way too long to figure out. Love that has no real respect in it is not actually love. It is just control with a warmer name. About 3 weeks later, Brenda called with some news. I signed a lease, she said. You did what? An apartment. Right here in Charlotte. 2 bedrooms. Nice complex near a park. I move in 3 weeks. I sat down on the back porch steps. Brenda, 35 years old. Her entire adult life spent within 20 minutes of my parents' house. She had asked my dad for permission to buy her own car at age 33. She had spent years staying quiet, keeping her head down, doing whatever it took to keep the peace. And now she had signed a lease on her own place. Watching you stand up at that table, she said. That was it. I realized I have been waiting my whole life for someone to give me permission to leave. And nobody was ever going to give it to me. I just had to go. She moved in 3 weeks. Daniel and I drove up to help carry boxes. Noah's main contribution was climbing into an empty wardrobe box and announcing it was now a submarine. That first night in her new place, Brenda hung one single piece of art on her living room wall. A small print that said, "Not my circus. Not my monkeys." I laughed until I actually cried. We set terms with my parents. Simple ones. Not open to any debate. Every visit had to be agreed on in advance by both me and Daniel. No surprises ever. Daniel's name was to be spoken with respect, at the dinner table and phone calls and conversations with their friends and neighbors and anyone else. If we found out that wasn't happening, the visits would stop. Derek Ashton's name was never to come up again under any circumstances. If any of it was broken, we would keep our distance. No debate, no second chance. My dad accepted the terms. I could hear what it cost him in the way he breathed when he said it. The way "all right" came out like a word with actual weight in it. But he said it. And Daniel went back to school that Monday. Same tie. Same hallway. Same kids waiting for him. He never told a single person at work what had happened over that weekend. Not one. About 6 weeks after all of this, I was picking Noah up from school when he came running across the playground toward me, backpack bouncing, shoes completely untied, totally him, and he grabbed my hand and looked up at me with the most serious face a 5-year-old has ever put on. "Mommy, my teacher says Daddy is famous." I laughed out loud. "Daddy is not famous, baby. He's just really, really good at what he does." Noah tilted his head to one side, working through it the way he works through every big idea. "Is that the same thing?" I stopped walking right there on the sidewalk. I looked at my son. 5 years old. Shoes dragging. The most honest question I had heard in months. I thought about everything that brought us to that sidewalk. The dinner table. Parking lot outside the auditorium. Clock ticking in my dad's office. Daniel's steady hands on that podium. Jalen standing up there with a piece of paper and a whole life he had rebuilt, one decision at a time, starting from a single person choosing to show up for him. "Yeah," I said. "I think maybe it is." The Educator of the Year plaque is on our bookshelf in the living room now. Right next to it is a framed photo from that day, Daniel and Noah on the stage after everything wrapped up. Noah has both arms locked around Daniel's neck, and they are both laughing at something only the two of them know. Daniel is wearing the $22 tie. I didn't drive out to that house near Asheville to get back at anyone. I went because I wanted my son to have grandparents in his life. What I came home with instead was something I think about every single day. You cannot force people to see you clearly, but you absolutely get to decide who has a seat at your table. My dad measured people by what they earned and what they owned. My husband measures them by what they're capable of, by the 15-year-old on a cousin's air mattress who just needs one person to show up, by the student who raises her hand in the middle of March for the very first time all year. And every single morning when Daniel Crawford puts on that $22 tie and drives to a building full of young people who need someone to believe in them, he is worth more than Frank Caldwell may ever fully understand. Real respect is not something a paycheck hands you. It is something you build by showing up when it is hard, by showing up when it costs you something, by showing up for someone who has absolutely nothing to give you back. That's my story. And if you made it all the way here, thank you. That genuinely means something to me. Before you go anywhere, I have some questions for you and I really, truly want your answers. First, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country and your local time in the comments. Seriously. I read every single comment and it always blows my mind where people are tuning in from. Second, if you were sitting at that table when my dad said what he said about Daniel, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up right then? Would you have waited? Would you have grabbed your stuff and walked out? Tell me exactly what you would have done. I want to hear it. And third, what do you think my dad's real reason was for doing all of this? Was it really about money and jobs, or do you think it was about something else? Drop your answer below. Let's talk about it. And here's something else I want you to do right now. Think of one person in your life who shows up every single day and never gets the credit they deserve. Teacher, a parent, partner, a friend. Share this video with them today. Let them know someone sees what they do. And if this story hit close to home, if it made you feel something real, if it reminded you of someone in your own life, if it made you think about your own family and what you would do, then please do 2 things right now. 1. Hit that subscribe button. I post real stories like this every single week, stories about family, boundaries, love, respect, and the moments that change everything. The next one is already on its way, and you do not want to miss it. 2. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. A friend going through something hard. Teacher who never gets enough credit. Someone who needs to know that what they do matters. Send it to them right now. It will mean more than you know. There is another story waiting for you right in the description below. Go check it out. I'll see you there.